Welcome, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Wandering Watercolor. So basically, today I'm painting the 8th page of the Cute Cats Watercolor coloring book. They're books that I make myself, all handmade using lithographs. And if you're here because you purchased one and you're just doing the paint along tutorials, thank you for purchasing that. I really appreciate it. If you just want to paint along with us, that's fine. Just pause and kind of draw out the image that you see, and then you can just paint along with us. Just make sure you're using watercolor paper. And yeah, let's get to it. So basically, I am using these watercolor palettes that I made myself. I'll leave a link in the description. And I'm using, they all come with a little brush that's included. That's the exact same brush that I'm using. This is just a soap dish you can get pretty much at any store or order it online. If you don't have one, you can just use a regular plate, like a small plate, porcelain plate. That's fine. These wash off completely without problem. They're non-toxic, and I always recommend having a little rag and scrap paper just so you can kind of brush off and do some test marks if needed. Now I am using a jar of water. I'm not using the reservoir because it just helps things go a lot quicker and I don't have to switch out the reservoir. Now for this one, this one's a little more complicated than the previous ones. Here's the one that we painted on the last session, and here's the one before that, and then here's the one before that. This one was fairly simple just because there was no complex patterns on the fur of the kitten. This one was a little more complicated. It took longer. This one was very quick comparatively to the other ones because, again, it's just all the same thing pretty much and just some shadows. And basically the pattern for this kitten is all of this is very light, kind of yellowish, and then these spots are all kind of like dark blue, brownish, more on the brown side. And so that's what's going to take a while. So the very first thing we will do is, let me clean up my yellow orange here. I have a bad habit of just kind of leaving some of these dirty and then having to deal with them whenever I go back to paint. So what I'm going to do here for the belly of the kitten, and really where all the light areas are going to be, I'm just going to do a very light wash with this color. I'm going to put just a little bit of pigment. I don't need a lot, and then a lot of water to dilute it, because I'm just going to do a light wash. When I start laying in the dark spot colors, they'll just go completely over it and it won't interfere in any way. So here we go. We're just going to go directly in. So there's that, going in. Just not gonna be worried about the spots right now. I just want to give it a base tone for the lighter parts of the fur. Go like that. Just gonna go all over here, all over here, all in the paws. Everywhere. Like don't even worry about any of the other colors right now. We are going to leave the muzzle kind of white-ish and kind of get in here a little bit. It doesn't have to be too much into the face. I'm just gonna go in a little bit, none in the eyeballs. Go around the eyes and kind of blend it in a little bit at the edges. Grab your rag, dry off the brush, and just kind of blend it in at the edges. And pretty much it. Now, while the rest of that is drying off, we will go in and put some colors in the ears and the nose. So grab a little bit of the red, a little bit of the orange, and some of the burgundy. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Go ahead and dilute it. And go ahead and lay it in the ears. It'll dry much lighter, so don't worry about how dark it looks right now. We'll go in here. And in here. We can cover up the little nostril, that's not a big problem. Okay. Now it's still a little wet, it's almost dry. This paper dries rather quickly. Some people don't like that. I actually really like that. I really like the fact that it dries quickly because it helps me get things down a lot quicker. Now we are gonna put down a little bit of shadow here so that the cat isn't just floating out in space. And the way we'll do that is put a little bit of blue, but we don't want the blue to be too strong because otherwise it'll clash with the yellowish color in the lighter parts of the fur. So we're gonna kind of tone it down with the black here and throw in some more blue. So that's fine, that's looking fine. So I'm gonna grab it and throw it right there. The light for this picture is coming kind of like that, more like at an angle coming forward, so the shadows in this cat aren't actually very pronounced. So we're gonna put a little bit just to show where it's sitting, and a little bit right here, kind of like that. It's an awkward angle. That's okay. So we have that. Okay, now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna get a little bit of the water and just kind of dilute it and run it in here. There we go. I'm not gonna worry about it too much. Okay. A little bit there for the other paw. Okay, that looks fine. There we go. Okay, so that's pretty much dry up here. We're just gonna put in some green for the eyes, get that out of the way for now. And this green is fine. Yeah, that's perfectly fine for these eyes. Go like that. Go over the pupils, but try to keep that little highlight dot in there. And I'm gonna actually dry it off in the rag and then pick up. If you don't have a rag, it's a paper towel works just as well. Like, don't stress out about that. Go in here and dry it off and finish laying it down. And there we go. Okay. Might pick up some of it. But yeah, go slowly so that you're not worried about getting the little highlights. The highlights add a lot of depth to the eyes. If you're ever practicing drawing eyes, if you put a little highlight in them, it definitely adds a degree of realism, but also it just makes the subject a lot more interesting. Okay, so now that this is relatively dry, we are going to go in and start putting in the dark brown spots for the fur. And we'll go ahead and we'll get as much as we can. I'm going to have to replace mine here in a second, but I will try to get as much as I can out of it. And I'm going to go ahead and run that color in here. And it's like a very dark brown. And that is fine. Okay, now we just basically start filling in the spots. And also there's some stripe like here in the tail. There we go. All right there. All right. Go right there. Okay. Don't worry if it looks too dark. They will dry a lot lighter. Actually gonna put that right here too. Right here. And also don't stress out about going completely inside the lines. That's the cool thing about these watercolor books is the nature of watercolor is not restrictive. Like if you do a regular coloring book, you pretty much just want to be right inside of the lines, but that doesn't really work with watercolor, so don't stress out too much about the details. I'm just kind of laying these in. I'm definitely not making them perfect. If you look carefully, they're not all perfectly set in there, and that's fine. You're just using them as a guideline of how to do things, and it doesn't have to be exactly like the lines are. Also, if you want to just use completely different colors, that's also perfectly acceptable. As a matter of fact, I would like to see that. If you end up using a different color scheme, let me know. I am interested in seeing how that turns out. I do plan for making different iterations of each of these, just because there's a large number of ways that any one of the watercoloring pages that I make can be rendered. So yeah, that's basically it's always fun. Part of the reason I made these is a lot of people, when they practice watercolor, and this is a lot of my friends too, I notice it's like you have to sit down and draw out the whole thing, and then by the time you're done drawing it, then you have to paint it. But when you're painting it, you're worried about messing up the drawing because it took you so long to draw it. And then the thing about watercolor is you can't be too restrictive. You gotta have some flow to it. You can't be too worried about it. I feel like that kind of messes the rhythm of the painting itself. So these are kind of like a solution to that, because you could just grab one and start painting, as opposed to worrying about drawing out the whole thing and then painting it. You can get right into the practicing of the practice of painting it. And that's the fun part. Also, it's, the more you practice it, the much better you get at it. And we're just continuing to just slowly, carefully, no rush. We're just getting the colors in and just laying it all down. There we go. I wonder what kind of cat that is. Maybe like a Bengal or something. We'll go right there. Like this spot I just kind of made up because I saw there was a line that I hadn't really connected to anything when I drew this. And that's fine. Again, it does not have to look perfect. I cannot reiterate that enough. And when we go in to add the shadows, since we have all of the flat colors down, it'll be very easy to implement them, you'll see. And basically, once you have the flat colors down, going over with the shadows is so much easier. Like, just so much easier. If the microphone ends up picking up some music from the background, that's just because somebody on my block sounds like they're having a party. I do apologize for that if it's picking it up. Although the music sounds pretty good. Okay. This is the hardest part of this piece. It's just kind of carefully filling in and making sure that you have enough of the color mixed so that it gets into everything. But if there's some variability in the color itself, it's not gonna look terrible. It'll just look a little different, but it's definitely something that's workable. Okay. Now we just have to do the head, and the head is not as much. Like, for example, this part kind of comes in here, kind of like that. And some stripes right there, like that, like that. Okay, and going in here. All right, perfect. And go in here and little eyebrow, or at least an eyebrow looking mark. And go in here like this. And in here, kind of go around the eye very carefully. Later on, we will go around that again with a much darker color. Since this is a more complicated coloring page, it will take a bit longer to do. Feel free to pause at any time and then get back to it at a later point in time. You don't have to do it all in one go. I'm just doing it all in one go because I want to make sure that the tutorial is out and available for people to color along with. Okay, there we go. Like that, and like that, and okay, that color is pretty much done with. So now what we're gonna do is, if you look kind of like where the defining lines are for the shape of like the legs, the toes, kind of the head itself, they're all very faint. Obviously they became more faint because we colored in all of that. So to fix that, we will go ahead and get some of the black here, put it in here, get some of the brown, put it right there. Okay. Now this looks like a very dark color. Again, always remember with watercolors, they dry lighter. It's not just that they dry lighter, they dry much lighter. Initially when you lay them down, they're kind of deceiving. So what we'll do is, here we'll get a little scrap piece, and so this is kind of like the darkness that we're working with right now, and that's fine. We'll go ahead and we'll lay down some of that right there to emphasize where the leg is, where the toes are, kind of like that. We'll do down here. We're gonna aim more at the darker parts, the ones that would naturally have more shadow. And as we're laying down the marks, the pigment load on the brush itself will lessen, therefore the marks themselves will become lighter. And once that starts to happen, we can move on to the upper part. The upper parts of the limbs, like right here would be a little darker because there's a fold where the head meets the body. Okay, so that's looking fine. Maybe a little more right there. So that's already become lighter. Maybe do a little more, couple more strokes, so that now I can go in on top here. This is gonna get much lighter. It's not gonna look that dark. Do a little bit right here, a little bit to differentiate where this arm is going, like that. Maybe a couple of strokes to show where the hairs are. A little bit over here, just to kind of show more definition in the ear. In the back of the ear, like that. Same right there. Okay, that's better. So now that we have this, I'll go ahead and I'll do some dark outlines for the face, like where the markings are here, the mouth, the eyes, around the eyes. So let's do that. Let's see. So this is pretty dark. But I would like it to be darker. So I'm gonna add more. Like, let's see, we'll go right here. That's darker, but we need more brown. So, okay, that's good. I'm good with that. I'm gonna just brush it off a little bit so I can kind of sculpt the brush, make sharper strokes, or finer, I guess would be the word. And go a little bit there, a little bit underneath the head. I'm gonna go where the mouth is, just very slowly. Right there. And then we're going to darken some of the lines above the eyes, going down towards the bridge of the nose, right there, just like that. Gonna do the same right here, and that's it for that. That's good. We're gonna get a little dot right here for the nose, and maybe a little bit of an outline. I'm gonna do this, another dot right there. That's it. That's good. I'm gonna add a little more contrast right here, and darken that, give more definition like that, and underneath here, I'm gonna go right here, put some little brush strokes for the hairs. Then just kind of emphasize that a little more. Okay, all of that so far looks good. And maybe a little bit here. Just I really don't like how this front leg kind of gets lost. So it's a little like, it's kind of like cheating, adding like a very defined outline like that. It's almost like a cartoon, but I just really like being able to differentiate between the different limbs right there. Okay, a little more like that, like that. So that's looking pretty good. Mind you, I know we still haven't added any of the shadows. This is just kind of like outlines and establishing the forms. That's fine. I'll go right here. So now I'm grabbing some direct black pigment. We are going to do the pupil for the eye, for both of them. Just go very slowly. Don't try to rush it. I'm just gonna mark it down. There's one pupil. And there's another pupil. Perfect. That's all we need. We're not even going to touch the eyes until those two pupils are dry. So we're good there. Now we can start focusing a little bit on the shadow. Now, since the shadow is kind of coming in, like if this was a ray of light, the way that the shadow is kind of coming in is at an angle from the front going to the back. Kind of like towards the lower right from a front angle. So it's kind of an odd angle, but nothing that we can't work with. So we'll go ahead and we'll grab some right here. This color is like, this is no longer a necessary mixture. So actually, I'm just gonna grab my rag and just soak it all up so that I don't have to worry about blending it with anything else. So now I have this space clear. I'm gonna grab a little bit from down here and kind of mix it in, dilute it with water. I'm going for what I want the shadow to look like. So if we imagine that this is the, like let's say this blob right here is the coat, we want it to be like that because then that looks like a shadow going right over it. And this is, yeah, this is good. I'm comfortable with using this as a shadow. I'm gonna just add more water to it, dilute it a little more. Okay, here we go. We're gonna go, first we'll go right here, just like that, just one stroke in there. And you can kind of see that that's basically a shadow covering that. I'm gonna make it darker. I'm gonna grab some more and make it a little darker. Because that's gonna dry lighter and then you'll still be able to see it, but it won't be as apparent. So we'll make it a little darker. Add a little more water. We have a nice dark mixture. That's transparent. It's still dark but transparent, like that. That's fine. So we're gonna grab it and we're gonna go right here in the belly, like that. Just like that. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna go back here like that. Show some of the toes. I'm gonna go here for the front leg, and again kind of emphasize the curves in the toes. Feel free to go slowly and then just play back what you're seeing here, kind of like that. And then a little bit here. This is all kind of in the dark, and back here behind the head. Gonna go like that. Okay, it's fine. Maybe do a little bit here for the face, show the form. like that. A little bit here on the ear. Over here just a little bit to emphasize where the upper lips are. Maybe a little bit under the chin. That's fine. Over here for the folds in between the front legs. So that gives it a lot more depth. I mean, you can immediately see kind of how that changes up the feel of the image. It will dry lighter, so that's why we made the markings darker to begin with. I'm gonna get some more brown now and just go directly where the marks are, where the spots are. So I know that we're going over where some of the shadow is that we just laid down. That's okay. Basically, we just want to add contrast because this whole piece looks too light still, and this will help kind of offset that. But we're not going to touch anything that's in yellow. Like that's because that light has already been established, or that shadow, I mean, has already been established, and we're not going to mess with where it's already light. We're basically just adding more visual interest. Okay. Like that. A little bit here. Add a little bit right there. A little bit in the markings right there. Notice that I'm not adding it everywhere. You're just adding some variety. You're not mixing it in everywhere. Although you can if you want to. That's definitely not gonna ruin it. As long as you're enjoying what you're doing and having fun with it, then that's what matters. So that's good. There we go. Okay, that's looking a lot better. I'm gonna add some here, just more definition. I always leave the ears without too much definition. Okay, there we go. Except now it looks like the cat kind of has a collar around its neck, so was not expecting that. But again, it will look different once it's fully dry, so that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so what we're going to focus on next while that's drying is laying down some more color, darker color for the ears, the inside of the ears. A little burgundy. That's good. That's fine. So we'll go in right there, just like that. And just a little bit more like that. We don't need any more than that. Put a little bit for under the nose just to emphasize the light. Honestly, that's pretty good. We are going to add a little more dark for the pads. Like that. So that's fine. And the last thing, this is pretty much done. So the last thing is I'm going to add a couple of small outlines. Get my trusty scrap paper again. Okay, I'm just going to do a couple of dots here, like not too much. I'm not even following the dots that I had already drawn. Just kind of like, that's good. We don't need to do more. Kind of do a couple more practice strokes here, just to make sure that there's more clarity. Just going to add that. A little bit right here. Like that. A little bit right there. In the bottom. The areas where there's like very little light, like the folds underneath the cat, like if you look at anything really, like let's say you look at my hand right here, the hand is pretty much covered in light because I have a light coming in from the top right down. But if you look where there's very little light is right in between the fingers, because it's just hitting at such an angle that the light doesn't fully penetrate there. So that's basically what I'm going for in little detailed areas like this where there's folds, like underneath the head, where the head meets the body, and right underneath the cat. I know that those specific areas give a lot of watercolorists some difficulty, including myself. I'm not a pro at it or anything. But I've noticed that when I amp up the contrast in those areas, it just helps with the definition, and the whole piece just reads better. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's basically the whole piece. So yeah, thank you for sticking with me and going through the whole painting. Oh man, I just realized my music stopped. I'm not even sure where the music stopped. But that's basically the whole piece. Hopefully you enjoyed that. You can kind of see, if you go back and forth between the starting page and the finished version, like how it's rendered, it's a big difference. So rendering things, especially in watercolor, it's difficult but very rewarding when you get it right. Thank you again, for purchasing the watercolor book. I do make everything, as I mentioned earlier, by hand from scratch, basically. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment or DM me on Instagram or email me on my website. All of the links will be in the description. I am interested to see what yours looks like once you're done. And thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.